Since the beginning of the day, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has recorded 77 combat engagements along the entire front line. Russian forces launched assaults in 11 directions. Pokrovsk remains the key area for the Russian army. There, Ukrainian defenders repelled 21 attacks. The Russian army is actively trying to break through the defenses. This is also happening in the Kostyantynivka and Lyman sectors of the front. What is the situation on Ukraine's southern front lines, and what plans of Putin did the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, reveal? Find out more in the following report.
Since the beginning of the day, Russian forces have tried to break through Ukrainian defenses 77 times along the entire front line, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In the Kostyantynivka direction, the enemy launched 14 assaults. Another 9 Russian attacks were repelled by the defense forces on the Lyman section of the front. Putin is trying to reinforce his ultimatums by attempting to achieve success on the battlefield, analysts say. That is why assaults continue unabated in the Pokrovsk direction, which is a priority for the Russians. Since the beginning of the day alone, the defense forces have repelled 21 attacks in this sector of the front. Experts are noting the situation in the area. The situation around Pokrovsk is complex and dynamic for both sides. Russian generals are trying to concentrate their efforts on the main directions, while Ukrainian forces are being stretched as much as possible along the entire front line. To achieve this, the Russians have intensified assaults in the Vovchansk direction.
The Russians are trying to encircle Pokrovsk, claiming that Pokrovsk and Mamuza are surrounded. This is not true. The defense continues, and in both the strategically important cities of Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, due to the extremely heavy losses sustained and the significant failure to achieve their primary objectives within the originally allotted timeframes, the situation remains critical. Unable to meet the timing for accomplishing their objectives, they are forced to throw reserves and second echelons, which were meant to exploit success, into the breakthrough.
Russia had planned to pull reserves from the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad direction in order to reinforce the offensive on Huliaipol in the Zaporizhzhia region. However, they have become bogged down in the Ukrainian defense and have been unable to do so, according to experts.
The enemy is suffering heavy losses in the south. Well, this is basically already the southern direction. Significant losses. There, Russian losses are literally measured in the hundreds over the course of a single day. In terms of manpower, I'm not even talking about artillery or military equipment, for example. The level of activity is unlikely to decrease today. Our assault unit is also operating here. You know that the Russians periodically spread, including fake reports, claiming that they've made advances somewhere. Obviously, these fake reports are primarily aimed at Ukrainian society in order to create a certain emotional background.
There are no signs that Russia wants to stop the fighting in Ukraine, he stated. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, and he added that despite Putin's statement to US President Donald Trump that Moscow is ready for negotiations, there are no signs of any reduction in hostilities from the Russian side. But the armed forces of Ukraine are steadfastly holding the defense. After all, Ukraine is now defending not only itself, but also Europe. We
have the resources for further military operations, and we will do everything necessary if the enemy continues the war. You can see that although we want peace, a just peace, Russia continues its offensive, using these peace talks as a cover. There are no pauses or delays in these operations. They keep sending their troops forward to seize more of our territory under the cover of negotiations.
In the past 24 hours, the defense forces have eliminated 1,180 Russian occupiers, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And the total losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale war have exceeded 1,179,000 soldiers. In addition, the day before, Ukrainian defenders destroyed 2 tanks, 2 armored combat vehicles, 31 artillery systems, and 2 multiple rocket launch systems, and 131 units of enemy vehicles and special equipment.
Ukrainian intelligence operatives destroyed a Russian Buk surface-to-air missile system. Another expensive enemy air defense system was struck by fighters from the Primara special unit. According to intelligence, they managed to track down and destroy the Buk in the temporarily occupied territory of the Zaporizhzhia region, near the settlement of Svitlodolynska. On the night of December 6th, units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces struck military targets in Russia's Riazan region and the temporarily occupied Luhansk region. This was also confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, clarifying that infrastructure facilities at the Riazan oil refinery and the Alchevsk metallurgical plant were hit. There, Russian occupiers were manufacturing shell casings. A direct hit and destruction of the low-temperature isomerization unit at the Ryazan oil refinery was recorded. This facility produces gasoline, jet fuel, diesel, and other fuels for the Russian army. In addition, a strike was carried out on the Alchevsk metallurgical plant in the temporarily occupied territory of Luhansk region, where the occupiers were producing components for shells on orders from the Russian Ministry of Defense. A hit and a fire at the facility have been recorded. The extent of the damage is being clarified. From a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant temporarily lost power from its source overnight on Saturday and was without external electricity for about 30 minutes. This was stated by Rafael Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA also notes that large-scale military actions have affected the entire power grid of Ukraine.
Drones in the air and robotic systems on the ground help effectively hold back the advance of Russian occupiers in the hottest sectors of the front. The 3rd Assault Brigade is one of the leading units of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in implementing innovations. Our correspondent from Freedom, Oleksiy Baranovsky, reports on the work of these specialists.
Trimming. You robots even have masks insure them, and you just in case of an accident.
The Tor 800 ground robotic complex is undergoing a crash test across the rugged terrain of Donetsk region. Servicemen of the 3rd Assault Brigade accompany it both in the air and on the ground. The old Niva, unlike the robot, couldn't withstand the Donbass off-road trials. The advanced robotic platform is remotely controlled from a secure command post at a quite considerable distance.
You know, it's what you're used to, right?
Every new ground robotic complex, as well as our own modifications and platforms. After repairs, they undergo testing before being sent out on combat missions.
And we follow the market, we follow the manufacturers. Many manufacturers come to us for help transporting drones. We help them and they help us too. So we have cooperation in this regard.
The NRK Troika workshop is not just a repair shop, but also a kind of innovation and tuning center.
We weld on side panels, print these kinds of boxes, solder circuit boards, make mounts for radios, make mounts for cameras, and we also weld on various types of protection.
Up to 80% of all the unit's logistics, the delivery of supplies to the front line, is carried out by robots. Less
Then across the river, I think, if I'm not mistaken, more than 300 pairs were transported in a month. Just imagine how many soldiers would have been needed to carry all that by hand.
However, NRK is far more than just logistics. Ground platforms are being used more and more. And as combat units on the front line,
Here we have the impressive termit. This is the Moro system. This is the advanced Luch combat module. This is also a fully human-operated combat module designed for various operations. This is our Destroyed combat module. This is a formidable termit expertly modified by our specialized workshop, transformed into a powerful combat module. This is a mini-Zmit of an experimental model.
the combat module of a ground complex can be equipped with a machine gun, a grenade launcher, and a flamethrower. The NRK can also carry a significant amount of explosives.
Kamikaze is mainly the cycle here. By the way, here's a legend about the one that took two in the shelter. This particular operation was specifically designed and executed to neutralize, or to put it more precisely, to effectively eliminate an entrenched enemy dugout. A fortified position where two soldiers belonging to the Russian armed forces were strategically located and operating from. One kamikaze drove in, blew it up, kind of hit the target, and well, not completely, didn't destroy the dugout entirely. And then others drove up and they put up a sign because they wanted to surrender. And with that sign, the two of them approached him, showing something. There were no cameras, nothing. And the drones led them out, and our infantry took them captive.
The 3rd Assault Brigade is a leader not only in military innovation but also in the number of volunteers joining the unit.
The commanders have a good attitude toward their own people. Well, how can I put it simply? Most of it is it's just decent human treatment and without any nonsense. And people are simply motivated, and they truly know exactly what they need to do, indeed, and they want to do it.
The 3rd Army Corps, which includes the 3rd Assault Brigade, is effectively holding back the Russian occupiers, along more than 150 kilometers of the front in the Kharkiv and Donetsk regions. Modern military technologies also make a significant contribution to the success of Ukraine's defenders.
The goal? It's already September and the war continues. We want victory. We are working on ourselves.
Oleksiy Baranovsky from Donetsk region for Freedom TV channel.
And now to other important events of the day. President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian negotiating team discussed with representatives of Donald Trump the key issues, the resolution of which could guarantee an end to the bloodshed and prevent a third Russian invasion. As the leader of Ukraine noted, it was a long and substantive phone conversation following the meeting in the United States. The parties also discussed the threat of Russia failing to fulfill its promises, as has happened more than once in the past.
Ukraine is determined to continue working honestly with the American side in order to truly bring about peace. They agreed on the next steps in the formats of dialogue with America. I thank President Trump for such an intensive approach to the negotiations. We can't discuss everything over the phone, so it's necessary to work in detail with our teams on ideas and proposals. Our approach is that everything must work precisely, every important detail for peace, security, and recovery. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.